Honourable Ruth Dyson.
Oh, thank you, Mr Chairman. Good morning to you. Can I say that a lot of the squawking from the opposition has been comparing this legislation to the legislation that was passed by the Labour-led government in 2000 in relation to the Rodney District Council and its abolition, its replacement with a commissioner. Mr Chairman, there are a large number of differences between that situation and the current situation that we find ourselves in. The first is Rodney District Council asked to be replaced by a commissioner. They agreed with the outcome of the review. They said that was the best outcome, and the following year elections were held. This is completely different, where the minister has ridden roughshod over not only the councillors but also the people of Canterbury and the Creech review itself. There was nowhere in that review that gave this minister the mandate to do what he's doing. The member for somewhere down south, who I recall writing to one of my colleagues earlier in her term in Parliament, inquiring about the dangers of water, who's now become an expert in water management, Jackie Deans, forgets what her party said at that time. And Mr Chairman, can I quote the Honourable Dr Lockwood Smith, the Speaker, who said when we introduced the bill to abolish Rodney District Council, he said, "I welcome the introduction of this bill into the House, bipartisan approach, because the people of Rodney wanted it. The people of Rodney wanted it." Then he said, "I must say, though, I'm not sure whether we needed urgency to pass this debate through all stages." The National Party had some principles then. They were opposed to putting the bill through urgency. Then he accused the Green Party of becoming voter fodder for our government. Now, Kennedy Graham is rightly outraged, and he was not in Parliament at the time. That situation may not have arisen had he been in the House. But, Mr Chairman, it is exactly what people are saying about the ACT Party and the Māori Party, that they're just acting as voting fodder for the National Party, letting this happen to the people of Canterbury, and there is no need for it. There is no need for our vote to be taken away from us. We have a right to vote for whoever we want in our region, for our District Health Board, for our community boards, for our City Council and our Regional Council. That right is being taken away from someone who doesn't even live in our region, who has the audacity to introduce to this House under urgency, ramming it through all stages, so not a single member of the public can say this is good, this is bad, why don't you think about that, there are some options. Not one single person, because the minister knows it all. The combination of the minister who knows everything and the minister who tells everyone who knows everything, Rodney Hyde, is just too scary to contemplate for too long. Last night their behaviour was extraordinary, and I predict, Mr Chairman, that it's going to get worse as the passage of this bill progresses. But, Mr Chairman, under urgency is not appropriate for a bill which takes away a fundamental right of so many New Zealanders. It is not needed. There are many alternatives. Russell Norman from the Green Party quite correctly pointed out that actually the fundamental purpose of this bill, which is not spelt out clearly in Part 1, is just as John Key outlined in his address at the opening of Parliament. He committed his government to taking action to removing roadblocks to irrigation in Canterbury. Who cares about the environment? Who cares about people's voice? Who cares about the ability of private profit-making companies to compulsorily acquire land? Not the minister, and certainly not Nicky Wagner. No consideration of the fact that we should have a say when our environment, our surroundings, our land, our aquifers and our rivers, our estuary are all at stake. What is it about Canterbury that the minister thinks should disentitle us from having a fundamental say in the purpose of this bill. It is not just to Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman.
I'll hear Ruth Tyson finish hers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It is not just the fact. It is not just the fact that the entire elected representation of the Regional Council is being removed. It is also the fact that it is not the next election that we will have an opportunity to replace them. We have an election due in October of this year, so we have to go past that election time and for an entire new term before the Minister may deem it fit to allow us, how generous of him, to allow us to vote for our regional council. But I have to be very frank, Mr. Chairman, I know that the people of Canterbury have no faith in this minister to not sneak through another dirty, devious little bill which would take away our right for a longer period of time. I wouldn't be at all surprised if the minister isn't lining himself up with the mayors of the region who have had no discussion at all, not one single discussion with their councils, entirely unilateral contribution on our so-called behalf. I wouldn't be at all surprised if the minister isn't lining himself up with the mayors to propose the equivalent of the Auckland super city. This may well be the start of the disestablishment of our regional council structure altogether. And I challenge the minister to be upfront about his behaviour for a change, to be honest and open with the people of Canterbury. We elected our regional council. Some of the people I wouldn't have voted for. That's one of the parts of democracy that we should cherish. There are a large number of members in this parliament that I wouldn't vote for either. That's not the way a democracy works. A democracy works when a person has a vote and sometimes they get the person elected that they wanted to have elected and sometimes they don't. What we have had taken away from us is that fundamental right to elect people or to vote for people who don't in the end get elected. Mr. Chairman, this is a major breach not only of our fundamental right to vote for our regional representation, it's also unnecessary. The Creech report did make that very clear. They said there were widespread concerns that had been expressed to them, and they said quite categorically in their report that their investigation did not back up those concerns because it's about politics, actually. This is a political game that the minister has now thrown his toys in and started playing. A political game, and it's at the expense of our water management. It's at the expense of our voice being entitled to be heard throughout the process of consideration, whether it's irrigation projects, whether it's water storage projects, whether it's any other requirement to take water from our rivers. Mr. Chairman, I would urge the minister, even at this late stage when he has so much of his reputation at stake, to reconsider. There are options. He knows that this side of the House would support the legislative requirements around the Canterbury Water Management Strategy. He knows that. We have said it in the House. The problem with doing it this way is that it is divisive, it's undemocratic and it's unnecessary. There is no need to cause such division in our community and to cause such frustration that the minister, because of his majority in Parliament, because he has had the privilege of taking up a ministerial portfolio, can use those powers to batter the people of Canterbury out of their right to vote. Mr. Chairman, it is a huge breach, actually, of both the privilege and the responsibilities of a ministerial portfolio. If it was necessary, as Sandra Lee thought it was in 2000, as the National Party thought it was in 2000, we would go for it. We would vote for it. The National Party then had the courage to say that. I've quoted the Honourable Lockwood Smith, who said he welcomed the introduction of the legislation appointing the Commissioner to replace the Rodney District Council because they had asked for it. And they knew that that move would put their district council into a position where very soon after, just a year after, they would once again be able to vote for their elected representatives. They knew that there was such dysfunction within the